just to divert from this a little bit, so we're in your house, right?
Yeah.
As with me, comes the pandemic, and all of a sudden I'm finding myself mixing at home 95% of the time, except for Dune. Tell us about your home studio a little bit.
Well, it started me just being a musician, and I use it for my own, enjoyment, writing stuff, playing. You can see lots of instruments around, and I've loved that, and I've had that for years. I've had different machinations of this studio. I was thinking of like, well, maybe I should do some work at home, and I'm gonna keep it separate. And music at home for fun, it's great. Work is work, right? So it was always that way. And I always just had two channels, and I didn't go into the full surround business and all that. I'm just doing music, and that was fine for me. Then it was like, well, okay, there's a really cool thing. Can you go do a voice for this, or, and to process something? And I'm like, yeah, sure, I can do that at home. So I do a quick little thing and bring it in. And there's a number of times where I've played drums and things on scores. I did a whole for Aang on Billy Lynn's Long Walk.
It is sort of weird being honored for the worst day of your life.
And we had a whole, it's like marching band and big scene at the end where he's like spacing out. He sees this, he's going into like PTSD kind of thing, and he sees, the marching band, and they're on stage, and it's freaking him out. And there's a whole drum line that comes out and plays this whole solo, and they just played a cadence, which is just a repeating phrase that they keep playing, and it's just the drums, and it's cool. It's very marching band like, but it's not interesting that much. It's more of a vamp. So they all came on stage, they're doing all kinds of stuff, and all you hear is this cadence. And Aang looks at me, he goes, "Why does it sound this way?" I'm like, "What don't you like about the sound? Am I messing this up?" And he's like, no, it's what they're playing. It's just straight. I want to, they're doing stuff. I want it to be exciting. I'm like, well, they're just playing a cadence. I can't do anything with that. You have to replace that. He's like, well, how do we do that? I'm like, I gotta call your guys, to call a score, make them go re-record this in a studio. And I said, but be careful. Do not let them go to a scoring stage and use orchestral instruments. It doesn't work that way. So they did. And of course they did that. And he flipped over a bass drum and played a concert snare and all that. And it's like, not happening. It doesn't sound like a band, marching band. I said, Aang, I'm flying back to LA. We were mixing in New York. I'm flying back to LA for a couple of weeks on our break. I'll do some stuff, bring it in. If you like it, great. If not, we have what we have. And he goes, fantastic, great. I come home, I call up Drum Doctor. I'm like, dude, I need some marching drums. I need all this stuff. So I filled up my room here with like, triple toms and, quads and stuff. And I had marching drums and I used some of my stuff here. I have some other snares and things that I used in combination with it. And my friend and I, we sat down and played a bunch of rudimental stuff. And I just multi-tracked the crap out of myself and played a solo, did all kinds of soloing from triple toms to snares, tuned bass drums, the whole thing, and mixed it at home, brought it back to Aang. I said, here you go. What do you think? He goes, that's fantastic. Thank you. So that's what's in the movie is me playing in here. So there's, a number of times I did that on The Gambler. They were using like djembes, which is an African drum, and the group comes out and plays. They were playing off screen in the back, so it was kind of echoing, and you could hear the whole thing. And then they come out and play, and then go on the court. So I redid the whole thing. I played it all in here and mixed it and brought it to the stage. So it started to be a thing. Like, wow, I'm doing stuff at home. I gotta kind of put these together, and then of course pandemic hits, and I'm like, I had just put in like 7.1 in the room, and I was using my older speakers, the Focal SM9s. So I'm like, yeah, I could probably do some mixes at home. Not the final, but I could pre-dub and do that. So I started pre-dubbing some dialogue at home. Then I was like, oh, can you do a temp mix? I'm like, okay. So, and we're all doing it on Zoom and other things, and we're sending tracks out of Spera. Like, what do you think of this? And I'm sitting there by myself. So I didn't even have a recordist, which kind of sucked, but I tried to figure it out and how to get these tracks down and mix them all down and send them and get approval. And then pandemic really hit. It's like, okay, now we're locked down. We're sitting at home. I'm like, I got to do something. I could still mix and do this. Let's amp it up. Then Dune comes along and Harder They Fall and King Richard and these other movies. So I started pre-dubbing at home. Then Dune's like, oh, we need to pre-dub some music and do a temp mix. Can we do it at your house? I'm like, yeah, that's pretty stretching it, but yeah, sure, let's try it. So I literally had Denis here, Joe Walker, the picture editor, Clint Bennett, and Ryan was here from Hans's camp, and there was just a group of us, a small group, mixing all of Hans's score here. It was so much fun. Denis just loved it. So we put the whole score together here. And then in Atmos, the whole thing, I was, assigning to Atmos channels, doing everything. Brought it to the stage at Warner Brothers, Stage 9 in Burbank, and it sounded phenomenal. I had done some tests. I, did my due diligence and said, make sure it matches and I can it translates to the stage properly. I knew what levels to be at, monitoring, because small room, gotta be careful. It's like you're right up on the speakers. It's like wearing headphones versus a big dub stage. So that's a very important issue. Mixing at home, you have to know how your stage, this room, translates to a big dub stage. Otherwise, you're just shooting yourself in the foot and you're going to redo everything over there and no one's going to be happy. Fortunately, I had done all that work and I knew where it was at, and I'd gone to Stage 9 back and forth and checked that out, and it was great. EQ's good, level's good, my imaging's good. So we were able to do that and went through the whole score with Denis and everyone here and made him happy here. I brought it there and I really didn't touch it that much once I got back to WB. Of course, we did some things and some level things, and I had effects and we had new things, and you do change things, of course, but the overall settings, the level, everything was solid. So I was super happy. Everyone loved it, and it was a really good way to do it. Another thing is reverb. In here, put on some reverb, sounds great. You bring it to the stage. Where'd it go? It's just gone. You're like, how did that happen? Because the room's big, you're pushing a lot of air, all these reasons, you're pushing through a screen that's 40, 50 feet away. Big difference. All that detail, the tails go down quicker and all of a sudden it's gone. You're like, wow. And I had to put more back on. So now I know when I'm at home, I need to push that a little bit. I need to raise the level, maybe make it a little brighter, whatever it is, the reason, maybe a little bit longer tail in here that I know will drop back when it sits in there. So it's all these little things add up, and it's a big difference sitting in here in a small room where you have a plasma TV and it's not a perforated screen. You're not playing through a screen. You're not 40 feet away. I'm, whatever that is, 8, 10 feet away at the most. So very different situation when you're mixing at home versus a dub stage. Ultimately, your product is through a dub stage that goes to a theater. Of course, you're going to say, what about streaming? That's a very good point. And that comes to what we do after the final mix, which are all the versions. So you've got all the formats to do. You've got Atmos. IMAX has two different. They have a 5.0, a 12.0, Atmos 7.1, 5.1. What we call a low row now. It used to be an LTRT, but now it's left only, right only. So there's all these formats that we have to go through. So you got your big Atmos mix, sounds great. Everybody's happy. It's the big showpiece thing. And IMAX, very similar, but they use, a different format where they have derived sub. They don't have a specific channel for a subwoofer, and their speakers setup's a little bit different. DTSX is similar in that way with Atmos, that it uses the same mix as your Atmos. But there's all these formats that you have to change your mix and keep the integrity of the mix and the choices that you wanted. And now you have to readjust for all these different formats down the road.
I can't tell you how many times I have done a mix and I know that the guy listening to the mix is going to approve it by listening to it on his iPad. I just know it. I just know it. That's what's happening. So I start thinking along those lines.
On Chaos Walking, they actually asked me to do a headphone mix. Now that was a first. So I'm like, okay, I'll try.
I did it on Tron Legacy. They asked me for a headphone mix.
I'm literally on a big dub stage with my headphones plugged in, sitting there mixing like this. I'm like, wow, this is totally different. Of course, dynamics are totally different. It's only left, right. I had to use more limiting and all kinds of stuff. It was
that's
very,
an interesting
very
point. For the music people out there, those of you that are in the record business, compression is such a huge part of what we do. But once we get into these immersive formats, compression becomes a different thing. We don't need compression in the same way we need it to hear everything, because we can use space as opposed to compression. We can move things off the screen and get away from the masking phenomena quickly. The masking phenomena, I always tell people this, is if you have a hi-hat and a shaker, they're playing the same part on the same size, you can't tell me which is the hi-hat and which is the shaker. But if you move the shaker to the other side, all of a sudden you hear a hi-hat and you hear a shaker. Well, the same thing, just multiply by Atmos. It's when you're living in a stereo environment, we use compression to be able to get a little bit more detail, to have whatever elements want to do that, and compression becomes more than just a creative tool, becomes a necessity. Whereas once you get into the more immersive formats, you're still going to use compression, but it becomes more of a creative tool than it becomes an absolute necessity for being able to get everything loud enough.
That's a really good point, because I still use compression and I use limiters, but the limiters are
Me
really
too, buddy.
limiters are really at the end of
Right.
the chain, just like making sure stuff doesn't go over. I'm not using limiters like you would maybe for a CD mix or some other formats. I'm using it just to make sure I don't go over if I accidentally get up into that level where it's going to bump and distort. I don't want that. So those are just left as like catch-all limiters at the end. We
call brick walls.
Yeah, brick wall, exactly. So they're just bumping a little if it goes way up there. Compression, absolutely, I'll use it on dialogue. Individual tracks, I have a reassign, which is like funneling. To explain that term is more like I have 20 tracks of dialogue, and I'm sending them all out of bus, and they go to one aux input that has different plugins, so that anything that I'm doing goes through that, and I can use like a master EQ, a master compression, and like that. So it allows me to do everything all at once. I have all of that on my separate channels to be able to deal with specific things, like one dialogue track needs to be compressed a little more than others. So I do that, and then it goes into the reassign and it hits my master one. So the master one obviously is much more open. It's not going to be hitting every line. Maybe it's there to give a certain overall feel.
Which I do with, I do exactly the same thing. I think a lot of music people do the same thing. And I always have, the way I like to do it is I have a medium attack, fast to medium release, always just tapping it, always just sort of right there on the verge. And I never really get more than 1 or 2 dB, maybe 2.5 dB, but it's sort of riding it to the top and keeping this basic level that I want to keep things at that level. And then I can do automation or get into one of the, as we say, unwind it into one of the source tracks to manipulate a certain, element of it, be it a vocal, be it a guitar track, be it one part of an orchestral track or something like that.
Yeah. And actually, it's very similar, in that respect with dialogue mixing, is you're trying to get intelligibility,
right,
and you're trying to get dialogue through, but sound natural. So it's very important that you're not over compressing stuff, over EQing things, and trying to get it through. You should be turning other things down and letting the dialogue play as a natural feel. Cleaning up that dialogue properly, keeping it full and nice, matching in your lavs with your boom and matching ADR to make it seamless so it sounds like they were on the set. That's the key. If you don't do that properly, of course, you're going to lose intelligibility, doesn't sound natural. You're losing your story, which is a number one thing. If you're losing that and you can't travel through the movie with your actor, you've done a disservice for the film and your director.
By the way, just for those of you who don't know, a lav is this thing that's on my collar, and a boom is this thing above our head.
Yeah, a lavalier mic. Is
So
what I'm talking
sometimes you'll have to use the boom to get a dialogue line, and other times you'll have to use the lavalier to get that dialogue line, and Ron has to match those sounds so that you can't tell.
Yeah, it can be a combination of the two, or maybe you just go with a boom. These days, so many shoots are done with multiple cameras that you can't get a boom mic into the shot close enough. Like you want it right here so you can hear, full track, and you're not hearing the walls and the, next door. But there's so many cameras going that you can't get a boom in there. That's a big problem because they're doing multi-camera, and now it's like, okay, you're stuck with only the lav recording. Better hope that those radio lavs don't have cloth movement. Like if I scratch my shirt right now, all you hear is like, I won't do that because they'll be pissed off. So sometimes it's one word or a syllable. We do all sorts of tricks like, oh, I can't hear the S on that line, and we'll steal an S and stick it in there. So, he says times, instead of time, because it got cut off, and we'll steal an S from when he said some other word and steal that S and stick it on there. Consonants, all these sorts of things I'm digging out. I use clip gain a ton. I don't use as much compression as I used to. In the past, I'm using clip gain, and I'm writing like syllable by syllable when I do dialogue. And, people look at my session like, what is going on with that? And you look at a clip gain, it's like that, but I'm trying to make it natural. There's also EQ, which is huge for me. I use FabFilter Q3, and it's dynamic. For years, I was hoping someone would make me a really cool dynamic EQ, and they did it. I'm just in love with it. I thank them so much.